But that ocean belongs to me. Because where is my ocean? I am entitled to that ocean. In future, we are going to have wars.
In recent days, a pair of bold statements made by Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has ignited a diplomatic storm in East Africa. At the heart of the controversy, Uganda's landlocked status and Museveni's insistence that it has a right to the Indian Ocean. He even warned of future wars if that access isn't secured. Tonight, we unpack the history, the tensions, and what the fallout could be for Kenya, Uganda, and the entire East African community. To understand why Museveni's rhetoric is causing waves, let's go back to the basics: geography and economics. Uganda is one of East Africa's largest economies, but it is landlocked. It relies heavily on its neighbors, particularly Kenya, to access the sea for its imports and exports. The Port of Mombasa in Kenya is a key artery for Uganda's trade. He argues that this dependence is not just a logistical challenge, but a strategic vulnerability, both economically and for defense. He has repeatedly raised the issue of political integration within the East African community, arguing that shared access to infrastructure and ports should be a fundamental right for all member states. What President Museveni actually said. During a radio talk show from Mbale State Lodge, Museveni did not mince words. He likened the relationship to a block of flats. Uganda is on the top floor, but the compound, the ocean, is claimed by those on the ground floor. He said, "That ocean belongs to me. I am entitled to it." The president went further. In future, we are going to have wars, he warned, if landlocked nations continue to be denied fair access. Museveni says he's tired of decades of negotiations. According to him, every time Kenya's leadership changes, long-standing deals fall apart, forcing Uganda to restart from zero, whether over railways, pipelines, or port access. Kenyan reaction and diplomatic response.
At this time, there are heated campaigns in Uganda. He is seeking for a re-election, which he calls his last term. And could it be that he's speaking to the Ugandans' ears what they want to hear?
Comment much on what His Excellency President Museveni said with respect to our oceans, but I believe very much that he does have a fairly great understanding with respect to the nature of our territory, and the nature of our right with respect to our natural resources, and his right with respect to natural resources within Ugandan territory.
We'll want to draw Uganda into yet another war soon. And of course, this time now, an international war away from the internal conflicts in Uganda. And I think Ugandans are also aware of this, and history has it that when Uganda waged war against Tanzania in 2 occasions, it suffered most.
In Nairobi, the reaction has been cautious but firm. The Kenyan government has sought to downplay the war rhetoric. Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Korir Singwe said that Kenya recognizes Uganda's frustrations, but emphasized that sovereignty and territorial boundaries remain central. He said Kenya is aware of international obligations toward landlocked states and that it remains open to facilitating port access. But he stopped short of endorsing any claims of ownership over the ocean itself. Why this rift matters: economic and strategic stakes. Beyond rhetoric, there are real economic and geopolitical stakes. For Uganda, losing or weakening access to Kenya's port could dramatically increase costs and complicate exports. For Kenya, conceding too much could set a precedent for other landlocked neighbors, potentially undermining its control over port revenue. There are also infrastructure dimensions. Museveni's frustrations tie into long-discussed projects, like a standard gauge railway extension and a crude oil pipeline that could link Uganda's oil fields to the Kenyan coast. Meanwhile, analysts note that under international law, particularly the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, landlocked states do not have inherent sovereignty over maritime zones, but they do have legal rights to access via neighboring states. Risks and regional implications. So what are the possible risks if this standoff escalates? First, the diplomatic fallout could strain East African Community, EAC, cohesion. Museveni's veiled threat of war is likely to raise alarm not just in Kenya, but among other member states. Second, investor confidence could take a hit. Ports, railways, and pipelines are long-term infrastructure projects that depend heavily on regional stability. Third, there's a narrative risk. Aggressive claims over the ocean may be seen as expansionist, even if Museveni frames it in economic and integrationist terms. That could inflame nationalism or provoke hardline pushback. On the flip side, some in Uganda may applaud the rhetoric as a bold defense of sovereign rights. Others may see it as political theater, time to rally support at home, especially ahead of election cycles. Possible paths forward. So what comes next? One pathway is renewed diplomatic engagement. Kenya and Uganda could double down on East African Community mechanisms, working through protocols that guarantee landlocked states access while protecting coastal sovereignty. Infrastructure deals could also be revived, explicitly binding agreements on port use, pipeline rights, and railway extensions that survive administration changes. There's also the option of multilateral pressure. Other EAC countries or development partners could encourage Kenya and Uganda to resolve this without allowing tensions to boil over. In the end, Museveni's dramatic rhetoric, claiming ownership of the Indian Ocean, may be as much about signaling strength and urgency as about substance. But for all the bold talk, the stakes are deeply real. Economic lifelines, trade corridors, and regional stability all hang in the balance. As East Africa watches closely, the question remains, will this be a turning point for greater integration or the spark of a more serious diplomatic rupture? Only time will tell.